when my daughter looked me in the eye and said, "Either you serve my husband, or you leave this house." I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I simply smiled, walked to my bedroom, and pulled out my suitcase. She expected me to fold, to beg for scraps of respect in a house I had built for her. But that day, everything changed. I remember the weight of the grocery bags cutting into my hands as I stepped into the living room. The afternoon light was soft, golden, the kind of light that usually carried comfort. But not today. My son-in-law, Greg, was sprawled in my recliner, shoes off, beer in hand, the television blaring. My wife bought that chair before cancer took her. Now it was nothing more than a throne for a man who believed he ruled my home. "Hey, old man," he said without even glancing at me, "get me another beer while you're up. Not that cheap stuff you drink. Grab me a Corona." The plastic handles of the grocery bags left angry red marks across my palms. I had bought those Coronas with my own money. He didn't even ask. He ordered. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Greg, I just walked in. Let me put these away." That's when he stood, towering over me, using his size like a weapon. "No excuses. You live here. You follow my rules." Simple as that. Before I could respond, my daughter Emily appeared in the doorway, dish towel in her hands, face stern. "Dad," she said, her voice colder than I had ever heard it, "just do what he asks. Don't make this a fight." The words cut deeper than any insult Greg had ever thrown. My little girl, the one I raised after her mother's death, the one I carried through storms and sleepless nights, now stood at my side, but not with me. With him. Greg smirked, sensing his victory. "See? Even she agrees. You live here, you contribute, and contribution means obeying when I ask for something." Emily nodded, arms crossed. "Dad, I'm serious. Either you respect Greg's role as head of this household, or you can leave, right now, your choice." For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the room. I looked at my daughter, searching her eyes for any flicker of the child I once knew. But all I saw was his arrogance mirrored back at me. "All right," I said finally. Greg leaned back, smug. "Good. Now about that beer. I'll pack." His smirk collapsed. Emily's face drained of color. Neither of them expected me to call their bluff, but I did, and I meant it. I left the grocery bags on the kitchen counter and walked to my room. My old suitcase waited on the top shelf of the closet, dusty but reliable. I pulled it down, placed it on the bed, and began packing quietly. Shirts, socks, the photo of my late wife, wrapped carefully in tissue, my reading glasses, my journal, just enough to leave behind what no longer belonged to me. Behind me, I heard their whispers, Greg hissing in panic, Emily's voice trembling, unsure now that her ultimatum had become reality. They thought they had trapped me. They thought I was too old, too tired, too dependent to walk away. But as I zipped my suitcase and wheeled it down the hallway, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. The Buick started on the first try, its familiar hum steady and strong. I didn't look back as I pulled out of the driveway. My daughter's silhouette was in the window, but I kept my eyes on the road. 30 minutes later, I checked into a modest roadside motel. The room was plain: one bed, one chair, one table. But it was mine. Mine to lock. Mine to breathe in. Mine to reclaim what they had tried to strip from me. That night, as I stared at the glow of the television in the motel room, I realized something crucial. They had given me a gift without knowing it. An ultimatum that forced me to stop sacrificing my dignity for their comfort. They thought they had won. They thought I would crawl back, begging for forgiveness. But by the time the first bills arrived without my name on them, they would understand. And that was only the beginning. The motel's heater ticked like an old clock, while dawn thinned the dark. I laid my papers across the tiny table: bank statements, insurance policies, The deed with my name and my late wife's. A lifetime of signatures that said I built this. I wasn't angry anymore. I was methodical. Precise. The way I used to be when I audited portfolios at the bank and found the leak nobody else could see. First call. First County Mortgage. I'm discontinuing the automatic payment on 214 Brookview. Account ending 4091. A pause. Keyboard tapping. The script voice of a representative trying to sound human. Sir, that draft has been active 5 years. Then it's had a good run, I said. Send written confirmation. Effective immediately. Second call. My insurer. Emily's SUV and Greg's truck were listed on my policy. A kindness that had morphed into entitlement. Remove both vehicles. Today. Are you sure, Mr. Hayes? They'll need their own policies. They'll need a lot of things, I said. Start with that. Third call. Credit cards. Emily was an authorized user on 3 accounts. Visa, Storeline, and a travel card I never used. Remove the secondary card holders, I told each agent. Freeze all new charges. I'll handle any existing balance. The rep said the same thing in different words. You're within your rights. I wrote their names, times, and confirmation numbers in my ledger with the deliberate carefulness of a surgeon. I brewed motel coffee that tasted like cardboard and victory. Then I opened my email and drafted 3 simple messages. To my banker, to my attorney, to my late wife's executor. Please prepare updated beneficiary documents and a temporary freeze on discretionary transfers. I'll be in Monday. I hit send and exhaled. At 9:12 a.m., the phone started ringing. Emily first, then Greg, then unknown. I let each call slide to voicemail like leaves into a gutter. I wanted their words on record. By noon, my inbox held receipts, and my voicemail held a progression from puzzled to peevish to panicked. Emily's first message was light. Dad, hey, the mortgage didn't draft. Maybe a bank error? Greg's was shorter. You need to fix that, today. The third message hours later had Emily's voice with a hairline crack. Dad, the bank says if we don't pay by Friday, we're in default. Call me. I closed my eyes and pictured the living room, the recliner, the beer ring on the side table. The man who believed obedience was rent. Default had always sounded like a bank word. Today, it sounded like a mirror. After lunch, I walked 2 blocks to a print and ship store and paid cash to notarize a letter revoking all informal occupancy privileges at my property. No screaming, no drama. Just ink, seal, and an address. Back at the motel, I phoned the county clerk. I'd like to file a 30-day notice to vacate for non-compliance with verbal terms of occupancy, failure to contribute, and harassment of owner. Do you have proof of ownership? She asked. I tapped the deed. Front and center. She explained the timeline. I wrote every step down. Legal timeframes are metronomes. If you set them in motion, they don't rush, and they don't stop. The calls kept stacking. Greg again, voice hot enough to burn. You're playing a dangerous game, old man. I saved it, labeled it, and smiled at the phrase old man. Experience is a dangerous game to people who've never played it. Near sunset, I got a different kind of ring, my buddy from the bank, Walt. Clark, I shouldn't tell you this, but your son-in-law tried to file an equity line last winter on your house. My pen stopped. On my house. He brought papers that looked real until they didn't. We flagged it. No funds released. Thought you should know what kind of person you're feeding. Something cold threaded my spine, not fear, clarity. Greg hadn't wanted a beer. He'd wanted a pattern. Obedience today, ownership tomorrow. The ultimatum, the posturing, the chair little rehearsals for a theft he thought would look like permission. I opened a fresh page in my ledger and wrote 3 words. Fraud, pattern, proof. Then I wrote a 4th, finish. By 9 p.m., my phone flashed 2 missed calls. I let the screen go dark and listened to the motel heater breathe. Tomorrow, I'd take the deed to the courthouse. I'd talk to a detective I knew from church about the forged equity attempt. I'd change the alarm code on the house and move the title folder to my safe deposit box. Order, sequence, no anger, just steps. At 9:17, someone knocked on my door 3 measured raps. Not frantic, official. I stood, every sense sharpening. "Mr. Hayes," a voice called. "Sheriff's office. We need a word about an incident reported at your residence." I slid the chain, opened the door 2 inches, and saw the badge glint in the hallway light. "Which incident?" I asked. The deputy met my eyes, the one that started when you stopped paying for everyone else's life. I let the deputy in. He was young, polite, the kind who still believed in procedure before politics. He carried a notepad already open. "Mr. Hayes, your daughter called us earlier. Said you abandoned the residence, and there's confusion about property rights. We need to clarify." I handed him the deed, the notarized letter, and the mortgage statements with my name stamped across them. He flipped through, his brow tightening. "These documents leave no doubt. You're the sole owner. They're occupants at best, not co-owners." He hesitated, then added, "Between us, sir, your son-in-law was hostile on the call. Tried to imply elder abuse, that you were being manipulated financially." The words slid off me like rain on glass. "I've worked in finance for 35 years. I keep records, officer. Every payment, every transfer, every receipt. If Greg tries to suggest incompetence, I'll bury him in documentation." The deputy nodded. "Good. Keep everything organized. We'll log your statement tonight. For now, you don't need to worry. Legally, you're in the clear." When he left, I locked the door, sat back at the motel table, and stared at the blinking cursor on my laptop. The cursor seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, steady, patient, waiting. I opened a fresh file, titled it Greg Evidence, and began typing everything I'd learned as beer demands, Emily's ultimatum, the forgery attempt, the debt whispers. Each line was fuel for the fire I wasn't rushing to light but keeping ready. The next morning I went to the courthouse. The clerk processed my eviction notice with brisk efficiency. "They'll be served within 48 hours, she said, stamping the papers with a red seal that looked almost ceremonial. I walked out with copies in my hand, the weight of law pressed into every page. From there, I drove to the police station. Detective Allen, an old acquaintance from church committees, met me in his office. His desk was cluttered with case files and coffee rings, but his handshake was firm. "What brings you in, Clark?" I explained it all. The ultimatum, my departure, the financial cutoffs, and Walt's revelation about the forged equity loan. Allen listened without interruption, then leaned back. "That's not just entitlement, Clark. That's fraud. And gambling debts would explain the desperation." "How much are we talking?" I asked. Allen tapped his pen. "From what we picked up at Glacier Peaks Casino, around 18 to 20 grand. And not just to the casino. Some private creditors, too. The kind who don't send friendly reminders in the mail." It all fell into place. Greg's arrogance, his need to control the house, his rush to shove me out. He wasn't protecting his pride, he was protecting his scam. He had built his life on the assumption that my wallet would always stay open. Now that it was closed, the walls around him were collapsing. Allen leaned forward. "Be careful, Clark. A man cornered by debt can get reckless. If he forges documents once, he'll do worse when the pressure builds." I nodded, already a step ahead. Reckless men make mistakes, and mistakes leave trails. That evening, I sat at the motel window, the neon sign buzzing outside. I watched the parking lot fill and empty, couples unloading bags, truckers carrying duffels, a steady rhythm of strangers. My phone vibrated against the table. Voicemail again. Emily, this time, her voice trembling. "Dad," the mortgage company called. "They say payment is overdue. Greg's furious. He says you're ruining us. Please, can you call me back?" A second message followed. Greg's voice, sharp and venomous. "You think you're smart, old man? You're nothing without us. Fix this, or you'll regret it." I saved both, labeling them by date and time. Proof of panic, proof of threats. As I slid the phone into my pocket, a thought surfaced, quiet, steady, undeniable. They thought they had given me a choice, serve or leave. But in truth, I had given them one, and they were about to learn what it meant to live with the consequences of the choice they made. Because soon, The sheriff's knock wouldn't be at my door. It would be at theirs. 2 days later, the knock came not on my door, but on theirs. The sheriff's cruiser rolled up to the curb in front of my house. And Deputy Warren stepped out, papers in hand. From the driver's seat of my Buick across the street, I watched Emily open the door. Her face was pale, her hair uncombed, the weight of sleepless nights showing in every line. Behind her, Greg hovered like a storm cloud, arms crossed, jaw tight. Warren handed her the envelope. She scanned the first page, and I could see her lips moving as she read the words, "Notice to vacate. 30 days." Greg snatched the papers from her, eyes flicking over the print, his face turning crimson. He shouted something I couldn't hear, then tore the papers in half, only for Warren to calmly hand him a second set. "Copies are filed with the court. You can rip those all day, son, but it won't change the clock." I could almost hear Greg's growl as the door slammed. That afternoon, my phone lit up again. Emily this time. "Dad, please, don't do this. We'll lose everything. The kids, the house. This isn't fair." Her voice cracked, and for a moment I closed my eyes, remembering the little girl who once asked me to chase fireflies with her in the backyard. But then I pictured Greg in my recliner, barking orders like a king, and I remembered her ultimatum: serve him or leave. I chose. Now she would live with that choice too. The town moved faster than I expected. By the weekend, word had spread like wildfire. At the hardware store, old co-workers shook their heads. At church, Pastor Williams pulled me aside. "Clark, I heard about the eviction. You've been carrying that family on your back for years. Folks are finally seeing it." And they were. Gossip traveled on invisible wires in a small town. Everyone knew now about the mortgage I'd been paying, about the groceries, the insurance, the quiet sacrifices stacked up like bricks, while Greg strutted around pretending to be a provider. Then came the second wave. Debt collectors. On Monday, a white sedan with Continental Recovery printed on the door pulled up to the house. I watched from my Buick as 2 men in plain shirts walked to the door. Greg answered, tried to bluff, tried to slam it shut, but one of the men wedged his boot in. Papers were served, signatures demanded, voices raised. By the time the car pulled away, Greg looked 10 years older. That night, my voicemail filled again. Greg, furious. "You sick old man, you're setting us up to fail." Then, quieter, almost pleading. "Just cover this last bill, and we'll work it out, I swear." But the most chilling was Emily's. "Dad, please, I'm scared. Greg's not himself. He's yelling all the time. The collectors won't stop calling. I don't know what to do." I sat at the motel table, listening in the glow of the lamp, each message more frantic than the last. And I realized something. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about exposure. Greg's mask was slipping, and the town was finally seeing the man I had always suspected he was. The next morning, Detective Allen called. "Clark, thought you should know. Greg came in trying to file a complaint, said you're senile, that you're being manipulated into cutting them off. He threw around the term elder abuse." I laughed, bitter and low. "And what did you tell him?" "That without medical proof and witnesses, it's baseless," he stormed out. Allen paused. "He's cornered, Clark, and a cornered man does stupid things. Be careful." That night, the motel manager knocked on my door. "Mr. Hayes, just so you know, your son-in-law was in the parking lot an hour ago, pacing, talking to himself. Security camera caught everything. He left, but he looked dangerous." I thanked him, closed the door, and stood in the silence. My reflection, in the motel window, stared back tired, yes, but resolute. Greg thought ultimatums gave him power. He had no idea that the moment he forced me to choose, he'd already lost. Because the truth had legs. And it was sprinting toward him faster than he could run. Sunday morning, the sky was sharp and clear, the kind of blue that makes every shadow stand out darker. I parked across from my old house one last time. A sheriff's cruiser was already there, idling at the curb. Deputy Warren stood on the porch with folded arms, watching as Greg and Emily carried boxes to the driveway. Emily's shoulders were hunched, her eyes red. Greg, on the other hand, moved with jerky, angry energy. Every slammed door and thrown bag, a protest against reality itself. The house, my house, looked different already. Curtains half pulled, weeds in the yard, the mark of people who never truly valued what they were given. When Greg spotted me across the street, his face twisted. He started forward, fists clenched, but Warren stepped into his path. "Don't forget the restraining order," the deputy said coolly. 500 feet, Thompson. That includes him and this property." Greg stopped, chest heaving, eyes burning with words he couldn't speak. He turned back toward the truck, shoulders heavy with defeat. Emily lingered on the porch. She looked across the street at me, her lips parting like she wanted to say something. But instead, she turned, picked up another box, and walked inside. By noon, the truck was loaded. With a final slam of the door, Greg roared down the street, tires screeching. Emily sat in the passenger seat, head bowed. They didn't look back. The silence after was almost holy. I stepped out of my Buick and crossed the street. Warren handed me a signed copy of the vacate order. "House is yours again, Mr. Hayes. Clean and legal." I nodded, my throat thick. As I stepped inside, the air smelled stale, heavy with weeks of arguments and fear. But beneath it, the bones of the house were still strong. Martha's laughter still seemed to echo faintly in the hall. My home was mine again, not because I'd clung to it, but because I'd chosen dignity over servitude. Over the next weeks, I set things in order. I repaired the locks, repainted the walls, and moved Martha's photo back to its rightful place on the mantel. Then, I met with my lawyer one final time. The will was rewritten in careful detail. The house and a portion of my savings would go to a veterans' housing charity, helping families who truly understood sacrifice. The rest, 2 causes Martha would have loved: scholarships, local clinics, community projects. Emily called once more. Her voice was quieter this time, stripped of entitlement. "Dad, Greg's gone. Left town after the debts caught up to him. I filed for divorce. I want to make things right. Can we talk?" I closed my eyes, remembering her ultimatum, the sting of her siding with him against me. And yet, beneath it all, she was still my daughter. "Coffee. Saturday. The diner," I said finally. "But this time, Emily, we build on truth, nothing else." That Saturday, she came. No Greg, no lies, just her. For the first time in years. We talked, really talked. She cried. She admitted. She owned her mistakes. Trust wasn't rebuilt in a day, but perhaps the foundation was finally being laid. And as I drove home afterward, I realized something. Revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about reclaiming your life, showing that dignity can't be bought or broken. Greg thought he had forced me into a corner, but all he really did was open the door I needed to walk through. In the end, I chose myself, and that choice was the sweetest revenge of all.